he has a successful career as an entrepreneur. He does have considerable experience, and he's used that experience in the nonprofit sector, and he and his wife and their 3 children live in Culleoka. He is one of the few leaders who have had the courage to make really tough decisions and stand for us, we the people, when it seems like it would have been going against, or was going against, the political grain. He stood. And he's going to be speaking about his experience as being mayor during COVID and why his leadership is different, especially during challenging times. So please help me welcome Murray County Mayor Amy Ogles.
Well, good morning. It's a rainy Saturday. I appreciate you coming out. I thank my cousin Brandon. A lot of people assume we're brothers, cousin brothers. He's one of the good ones. And one of the things that he said is hostile. And what you don't realize is that there are many pieces of legislation that people like my cousin want to put forward and have the honest and open debate. But then you have a handful of folks in leadership that say, well, no, you can't do that. And if you do that, we're going to punish you. Yep. And then so, some of the pieces of legislation, you almost have to be sneaky and kind of camouflage chuckling over there, because we talked about, some of the work he was doing, which is fantastic. You can't have an autonomous zone in the state of Tennessee. And it's because of him. That's where he was. You can't have a bunch of knuckleheads thinking over Seattle, what they did in Seattle, some of the other areas in Portland or whatever, and doing it here. And if they do it, they're liable. They have to rebuild your business. They have to pay for your health care. They have to reimburse you for the damage they've done. And so that was an important shot across the bow, but we're not going to tolerate that in Tennessee. So I'd like to know how many Trump supporters do we have in the room? Is this a Biden rally? How many Trump supporters do we have in the room? How many people think that the election was stolen? And how many people think that the state of Tennessee and our governor should be leading the charge defending our president when he was that's one, I don't necessarily want to come here and kick the governor in the shins, but that's what I've been doing last year. But, it's like, where do you begin? Like, where do you start? When you look at this past year in COVID, by the way, full disclosure, I did not read the fine print. I would encourage you to always read the fine print. I didn't know that pandemic and race riots were part of my job description. I had no idea. I mean, every mayor that got saddled with doing the governor's job for him was thinking, this is not what I intended to do. But that was okay, because I tend to be outspoken. I'll take a stand on principle, and then I'll take the licks afterwards. And so that's what was important during COVID is, I took an oath. I'm a constitutional officer to uphold the Constitution of the state of Tennessee. That Constitution does not give me the authority to make law. My cousin has the ability to make law. The state law itself, under the Emergency Powers Act, does not give me the authority to make law. Now, he does, but I don't. And so when the governor deferred to me the authority to make you to wear a mask, I at that point became the General Assembly on that issue in Murray County. That's important to understand, because that edict that I could write with a signature has the penalty of up to a year in jail.
Absolutely.
Now think about that for a minute. Like, I always tell people, I'm not a king. Your governor's not a king. If you want me to be a king, I will, because I'm going to build a wall and I'm going to kick some people out, right? The ones I don't like. But that's not the kind of government we have. Only the General Assembly can make laws. So whether it's smoking or drugs or seat belts, those are all laws passed by a General Assembly that you elect. Me doing a mask mandate, you didn't have a choice in that, because I don't have that authority to do it. And I can take you into the wonkiness of 58-2-107, which is Emergency Powers Act, which is what the governor is in violation of. It should be noted that by ignoring some of the provisions in that Emergency Powers Act, so what it does is, I guess I ain't going to go into it. You know, I start talking. I don't have, set of remarks. But the first two paragraphs, and they're very short, basically says anything during a state of emergency that the governor does has the force of law, period. It does. However, there are certain times and things that he can and cannot do. One of those is giving me, it actually states in there, he can't give me new authority. So again, I would challenge anyone to find in the state constitution or find in state law where I can tell you, you know what, I think you should take your harness. I think you should wear an ankle brace. I have no jurisdiction over your health care. None. HIPAA, by the way, protects you from me and your health care. So why we're even having to have this conversation under the veil of a pandemic is trouble. But the last thing it says under 58-2-107 is that your right to bear arms is protected even during a pandemic or state of emergency. And so, okay, but he's not going to take away your right to bear arms. It's all about precedent. So when Clinton was impeached, they went back 100 years to figure out how to do it. We've now set the precedent in the state of Tennessee that during a state of emergency, the governor, whoever he or she is, can ignore provisions within state law. It has been codified with a precedent. So whether it's 10 years or 20 years or 50 years from now, the governor can pick and choose what aspects of the law that he or she wants to enforce. That is a scary precedent. And I put blame on the lieutenant governor and the speaker for not stepping up and calling him out on it. I blame our attorney general. Andy Beshear, liberal Kentucky governor, I'm sure he's a nice guy. His AG, his attorney general, called him out when he crossed the line. Our AG took it out. I don't know where he did. But he didn't do his job. So there's a whole other conversation about how we appoint the attorney general should he or she be elected. But one of the things, anybody heard of the name Ron Desantis?
Yeah. Yeah.
So, there was an article, and I don't know who did it. It was, a tale of two states. And it was New York versus Florida. And it looked at the COVID response and looking at population and all that. It talked about all the things that DeSantis got right. I think you could also do the same thing with Florida and Tennessee. In that, the state of Florida has passed a true bill banning vaccine passports. Right. A business can't tell you to take an experimental vaccine. Right. Look, I'm not anti-vaccine, but your health care is none of my business.
That's right.
And a business under HIPAA has no right to ask you about your medical condition when you walk in the door.
Right.
So why should states, well, we know why, because they're trying to steal our country, but states are now having to codify things as a federal government or defending against the federal government. In Tennessee, we didn't do that. We stopped short of protecting your rights against vaccines. The governor lifted the mask mandates. By the way, he never had the courage to do it, so he passed that off to us. And that's not you, David. However, school boards can still make for children wear a mask. Now, there's enough data to prove children aren't at risk. To prove and to show that children are not mask spreaders. So why in the world would we leave that in place? In Florida, Governor DeSantis passed a bill, advocated for a bill, preventing social media platforms like Facebook from banning you. I wrote a letter to the governor asking him to do the same thing here in the state of Tennessee. So one of my colleagues, so I don't know if you've ever heard of Club for Growth, it's a conservative organization. They started a new program, a fellows program. And so they chose, last year was the first time they did it. They chose 40 individuals from across the country who they felt were future leaders. I had the privilege of being one of those. The state rep down in Florida who passed the bill against Facebook was one of my colleagues as a fellow. And so I simply copied his legislation, sent it to the governor, and I would have heard more noise at a funeral than I heard out of the governor's office. Never responded. Now keep in mind, the context of that is we gave Facebook over $60 million to come to Tennessee. So we just invited the enemy inside the gates. I mean, I had the privilege of, I just helped negotiate one of the largest deals in state history. We just wrapped it up, just made the announcement. But I wouldn't have participated in that and brought them to Murray County if they didn't bring them to Tennessee. So why would we want Facebook, who we know is an activist corporation, who doesn't believe in what we believe? Why would we want them here in Tennessee? I'm all about jobs. Look, Murray County is a working class family. My people work hard. We're not affluent like Williamson and Davidson. We want jobs. There is a child, so I'm going to dial back a little bit. But I can feel the urge to speak coming as if my wife's just saying on my shoulder. But it's one of those, if you don't like who we are as a state, then get out.
Right.
And look, Facebook, I hope they stay. But they need to stay out of our General Assembly. If they can't take their life and live, and it's one of these things, the transgender bill, which my state rep down from Murray County, he carried that, he was the advocate for it, but he only could get it so far, again, because of the powers that be. So in Florida, by the way, if you're a dude in a dress, you're still a dude. Right. Just in case there's any confusion, right? So in the state of Tennessee, in high school, boys can't compete in girls' sports. In Florida, it's not just high school. It also stretches up to NCAA. And if a university allows a boy to compete as a girl, they lose state funding. Now, given the context of all the wokeness happening at UT Knoxville, why aren't we doing the same thing here? Furthermore, again, if you're a dude in a dress, you got to use the boys' bathroom, not go to the bathroom with my daughter. Does anyone have trouble comprehending that, right? Well, instead of passing a bill this legislative session, they need to think about it. I don't understand what there is to think about. If you're a dude in a dress, go to the boys' bathroom. Right? That bathroom is for my daughter, and my wife, and my sister, and my cousin, and whoever else. And so we've become a state of half measures, not because of conservatives like our cousin, who's out there fighting the good fight, but because of some of the people we have in the leadership that don't necessarily represent you and I. And I could go on, but I am on a tight schedule, and so I'll go from here to Murfreesboro. From Murfreesboro, I've got to go to Lenore City outside Knoxville. I got to go back to an event down here tonight. So I'm going to stop talking because I can just, get going and answer questions.
Are you running?
I know y'all aren't shy.
Are you running for governor?
So I'll put it back on you. This is the will of the people. How many people would like a more conservative governor? We've got a gentleman here that's thinking about running for office. I hope I didn't out you. But he's going to need help. It's one thing to talk about it. It's another thing to do it. So if someone ran for governor who's actually going to, my attorney general, if I was governor, the lawsuit on the election, we were 16th to sign on.
Right.
Right here. Arguably, we're the most conservative, top 3 most conservative states in the republic. If we're not first or second to pull the trigger on things like that, you're fired.
Right.
I've got a letter for you to sign. It's your resignation letter. If you don't want to be an AG and do your job, then leave. Amen, right? And so we've got to start leading our country by being a vocal state. So think about what I'm just a little old mayor from a little old county in rural Tennessee. But when the governor passed the buck to us, And there was some, they kind of assumed that a lot of the counties would follow Williamson County. You know, I was more like, hold my beer, watch this. I'm not going to do it because I don't have the authority to do it. 2/3 of the mayors in the state of Tennessee follow my lead instead of following Kevin's. Now you'll hear a statistic, well 65% of Tennesseans were under mask mandate. Yeah, that's because 4 liberal Democrat mayors, Memphis, Nashville, Knoxville, Chattanooga, all passed mask mandates. The governor owes those people an apology because he left them behind, because they became non-essential. Next question. Yes, sir.
You mentioned that the governor violated certain provisions of the emergency law, but if you look at the Tennessee Declaration of Rights, the whole thing is a violation of the Tennessee Declaration of Rights. It states clearly that these rights cannot be abridged even under emergency situations. So if you were governor, would you basically do away with the current, or encourage the legislature to do away with the current emergency standards?
Yeah, absolutely. So if Gary Humble were here from Tennessee Stands, he would have this whole argument and kind of presentation on why 58-2-107 is unconstitutional. The fact remains that it is law. It has been passed, so it becomes something that we follow. So if you have something like that that's broken, then it needs to be changed. So again, that's one of the challenges to, the Speaker and Lieutenant Governor. Why didn't you modify that to fix it? Because, it is in conflict with the Constitution. And so, and again, Article 7, Section 1, when it talks about, my authorities, it's very clear. And again, this is significant. I'm a nerd. Forgive me for being a nerd. But, when it talks about the constitutional officers and the subdivision, it's referring to me. I am the subdivision. I am one of the subdivisions of the county when it comes to authority, that all of my duties and authorities are derived from the General Assembly, period. There's no comma, there's no semicolon. It doesn't say that during an emergency I can suddenly become a tyrant. It is a period. And the General Assembly, even during an emergency, would have to convene a special session to give me new authorities that aren't already codified. Because there's things I can do. I can declare a state of emergency. If we need a bulldozer to stop a river or a dam from breaking, there's things that you do during an emergency to save the general public. But what's significant about that, bless you, is that the intent, and a lot of times when you look at laws, you look at the intent of the law, how and why they were passed. So 58-2-107, all emergency powers are supposed to be limited in duration and limited in scope. The state of emergency we've been in for this last year has been neither of those things. And so if you're in a situation where, so I'll give you a hypothetical. March and April, COVID, we're all terrified. I'm terrified, the governor's terrified, Brandon's terrified, you're terrified. We just didn't know what it was going to be like. Come May and June, we had good data out of South Korea, Germany and France. All the stuff coming out of China was BS. We knew it was BS, right? There's no point looking at their data and trusting it. And what was happening in Italy was an anomaly to itself because they have no health. I've spent a lot of time in Europe, traveled Northern Europe. They have no health care. All right, so if you have a disease that's running through the rural area and parts of Northern Italy, it's going to be worse there than it is going to be in a national or anywhere that has doctors on every other corner, because they have no doctors on every other corner. When your closest hospital is a 4-hour train ride to Rome, if they'll even let you on the train, so it's not apples to apples. But the governor could have issued a mask mandate for a short duration, so 30, 60, 90 days, right? Boom, you have to do it. I, as mayor, would have had to upheld that portion in the Constitution and supported it, maybe. That's one other question. But it would have also have to have been done with a calling of the special session of the General Assembly.
Right.
To codify it. Look, if I'm doing this thing that is above the norm, I then need to bring it to the General Assembly to codify it and address it. Because you also have to understand, you can go to jail for not wearing a mask. So you need a law that clearly states how and why you would go to jail.
Right.
There's a fine. Again, I don't have the authority to write a law that I can fine you. I did it under this. So again, how and why is that fine going to be implemented? How and why is it going to be enforced? Is that now the responsibility of the sheriff? So there's a lot of things that have to be addressed. You know, there's unintended consequences. Okay, you know, on that note, I'll tell you a story that, you know, it was I dreaded, you know, I started doing my live updates because I knew sooner or later we would have the first case. So I was doing, you know, stay up as late as I could, getting data from Europe to really try to look and study the virus. I'm not a doctor, I don't claim to be a doctor, but I am an economist and understanding numbers. Also using the data that was provided to us by the state and the president. You know, President Trump was great during this time. You know, I was one of those prior to because of my other role, I was included on a weekly call with the White House, giving updates on COVID. But all that to say is, when it came to the point that I had to decide to close schools in Murray County, because at this point it was elsewhere. It was in Kentucky, or it was in New York, or it was in Nashville. It wasn't home. When I made that decision, I held that press conference, I knew it would be real at that point. So that afternoon, I went to the grocery stores, went to Kroger, Aldi's, and Walmart, and it was sheer panic. I literally watched people just going to the cereal aisle and buying. They didn't know what they bought. Walmart, of all places, you go to Walmart, and you got 300 yards of a meat counter. But you got this long meat counter. There was, I'll never forget it, there was 3 packets of liver. Even during the pandemic, nobody gets liver. But it was there. There was no chicken, there was no beef, there was no pork. There was liver. I even took a picture of it. Just, you have to understand timing, right? Sometimes my mouse gets me in trouble. But I just want to say, even during the pandemic, nobody likes liver. Look, I can prove it. And, but during, the point is during those 2 months, we were terrified, and it required or called for extreme measures. But we rather quickly knew that it was fear porn that was driving this, right? Hey, look, it's real. I have a regional hospital. I have a regional health department. Every morning, not anymore, I was getting updates on case outcomes and fatalities. I can tell you people died. I can also tell you the day is a bunch of bunk, but that's another program. I mean, we literally had, by the way, I want to jump. Dr. Nepal is just recently, so he's a doctor at St. Thomas. I was a big St. Thomas fan. But he's doing great work in the field of human trafficking and just won an award. So give Dr. Nepal a round. I worked in human trafficking, and I ran 12 countries, and let me clarify, anti-trafficking. The media here, maybe sports trafficking. But it's hard work, and you see the worst that humanity has to offer. So kudos to you. It is a real problem. A lot of our work is international, but we work domestically as well, and it's happening internationally. So thanks, Doc. I appreciate you. But we had a case, death count. Went to St. Thomas. It was what would you consider a catastrophic heart issue, in that they went into the hospital and they were never coming out. Right? They were going to die at the hospital. Got COVID at the hospital. Never in Murray County was COVID. Never experienced Murray County, COVID in Murray County. Subsequently died at St. Thomas with COVID. Where do you think that death was attributed to?
Murray County.
Murray County, right? And again, when you're trying to calculate and it's mass data, none of it's going to be perfect. But please understand, the numbers are flawed. Yeah. Question? Come on, I know you know that. Yes, sir.
There's a lot of grassroots, happening. I grew up in Nashville, I live in Atlanta right now, and we're seeing everywhere across the country grassroots and probably the attendance today. What are some of the most effective ways people can get involved and organize and affect elections and legislation?
Yeah. So the question is, okay, we're here. It's Saturday morning. I know you're serious, right? What do we do next? So I'm county mayor, but I'm also chairman of our local Republican Party. And one of the things, I'm trying to get our mission statement to focus on. Look, the presidential race is important. A Senate, governor's race, they're all important. But sometimes those races distract us from the fact that we have school boards, we have city council races or county commission races, and in times we don't even have people run. I mean, no joke. This last election before, we had a school board member, just life, it was time for him to younger man, family, whatever. He said, I'm retired. I'm not going to do this anymore. Well, the filing deadline comes, no one pulled the petition. So you had the incumbent for the seat running as a write-in because nobody else could run.
Oh my gosh.
So we've got to do a better job of electing our city councils and our school boards, because again, going back to the state of Tennessee, so now, and the pathway to where it's paved with good intentions, right? You now have the ability, if the school is teaching transgender reassignment, whatever that's called, or the LGBT, RFQ, whatever those letters are, that those policies or those agendas or those curriculums, you can opt out. That's fantastic, right?
They should be teaching it at all.
Wait a minute. So I have children. My daughter just turned 14. It's like a nightmare, right? I always joke the first 12, man, I'm looking, so this is when she's little, man, I'm looking forward to the first 12. It's the next 12 that scare me.
Yeah.
Well, it's here. It's not funny anymore. But so she's 14, she's tall, and she's beautiful, and I've got 2 sons that are 11 and 5. But, in the school year, I'm going to invite over all of their classmates. All right? We're going to have a big party. And I send a message to their parents and say, hey, we're going to play some scary movies, but you can opt out if you want to. What does that imply?
Your kid will do it.
Yeah, we're gonna be doing some stuff, right? We just codified in the state of Tennessee that you can teach LGBTQ and transgender reassignment in schools, and they can cite this law that forces you to opt out to defend themselves. Why don't we just ban it like Florida?
Right.
I'm not just being Ogles on that. I'll just be honest. I got to the point now where I'll start to put something on Facebook and show my wife, and she's like,
No.
I'll make a modification, and usually about the third time I can get approval. It's where she's not with me. That's when so if I post something and it's like, uh-oh, everybody watch out, it's because my wife wasn't around.
I have just one other.
So I tweeted the governor, and I basically asked him on one of his number one policies, I said, what would Ron Desantis do? Like, just do that.
Yes.
And that really came out of a conversation. I was just frustrated with the governor. I mean, we're all you're here because you're upset. You're ticked off. You're woke, right? We need to be more woke. And I was like, when he wakes up in the morning, nice guy, I'm not going to disparage scary. He puts his feet on the ground. He's at a post-it note beside his bed, and then write everything he's thinking about doing that morning or that day, and then just do the opposite. And then when in doubt, go see what Ron Desantis is doing. Then, it's frustrating. We have, again, we're one of the most conservative states in the country in this legislative session, despite the hard efforts of my cousin Brandon. And we have some really good conservative, we've got a great conservative caucus in the General Assembly, and he's one of them. But they are, one of the first things he said, hostile, right? Because in the back of mind, that's the environment he's working in to try to protect us, because we have people in the top 3 or 4 or 5 positions that don't agree with we, the people. Yes, sir.
So you've got, the problem with that is we have too many people in the legislature that care more about what the Chamber of Commerce thinks than they
That's
care.
Right,
That's
right.
the issue now, and the NFIB to a degree. But here's my question for you. If you are the governor, what are your priorities going to be?
Well, again, what would Ron Desantis do? Some of this stuff that is in the state of Tennessee that's being really pushed across the country, we've got to get that out of our schools, period. And even if that means, and this is a tall order, Tennessee is one of the 5 worst offenders at taking federal money.
Yep.
So what that simply means is that if you want the transportation dollars, you have to put an HOV lane in where they want it, or you have to put a park, you have to have so many linear feet of pedestrian pathways. And not all of that's bad, but at the same token, maybe we don't need another pedestrian pathway. Maybe we just need roads, right? Well, the same thing with schools, is we take a lot of federal dollars figure out a way, bless you, to fund our own schools. Like, we are one of the best run states in the country, per net, lowest per capita in the nation, low tax. And if there was ever a year to do it, you know, we've again, anytime the government says, here's some free money, and just make it terrifies them, they've given us all this extra money. If there was a year that you could try to transition or start the process, we have all this cash. We're cash rich in the state of Tennessee. We've got to unwind our budget. Again, I'm not an idealist, right? Where we can, we've got to sever those ties. So, our right to bear arms, your right to constitutional care should be stronger. We are a sanctuary. We should be a sanctuary state.
Yes.
We have only 36% of our kids can read in 3rd grade.
Right.
Let that sink in for a minute. Only 36% of our 3rd graders can read on level. And we're more worried about figuring out a curriculum that's politically correct for the woke crowd. I don't care. If you're a dude in a dress, go be a dude in a dress. I might look at you funny, but I don't care. I do care about the 3rd graders that can't read. They go into 4th, 5th, 6th in high school. They can't read. They can't do math. They are doomed to fail.
That's right, yeah.
So how about we focus on that?
How about getting the teachers union out?
We're right for it to stay. The teachers union in Tennessee has much less power than it does in a number of states, but like the chamber, they still do have influence. Yes, sir. Do you need to keep going? I mean, did that answer your question? I mean, it's all about Tennessee values, Tennessee first, and what's important about that is Tennessee, we touch 8 other states. So if we do something from a tax policy standpoint or a curriculum standpoint, the other states are now competing with us, whether it be for jobs or incoming investment or traffic. And so we have the ability to affect the entire Southeast, not to mention if you get South Dakota and Oklahoma and Texas and South Carolina and Florida, and we're all working together. And so, for example, and I'll have to talk in code here, but there was a Republican Governors Association call, right? And the governors were having this conversation during COVID, and they were trying to come up with a plan on opening together. There was one state in the conservative muck that was the holdup. I'm not going to say which one it was, but you can probably guess. Ron Desantis went ahead and did it on his own. We should have been leading. We should have been supporting Florida, standing with Florida, supporting and standing with our president, instead of placating to the president.
I was thinking that you talk about, you've got people like your cousin, people that are real strong, and then you've got a lot of these people that seem to be fearful of the left. If they have something going on, they have a bunch of red-shirted anti-gun movement, they have the Antifa, they have all these leftists that they fear. But our people, they don't fear. Because when they have a bill up,
That's because we have jobs and we're busy. Right?
well, yeah, and I hear that, but some of these other people have jobs too. And if we have a rally on Saturday, we still don't do anything. We like to be on the keyboard and argue and tell all this stuff. What I'm wondering is that a big problem? And my vision for this group is that when something happens, that's why I'm recruiting so much, that we can have 500 people that is at your all's disposal, and if a conservative can call the leadership here and say, we've got something important, we need 500 people at the general center. Could that make a huge difference? So then people can.
I think the answer is yes. I mean, because think about, we have some in this room who wants Coca-Cola. And, I don't know if you've been paying attention to the news, but Coke got woke. They have since backed off of that because it hurt their sales and presumably stock prices, right? Now, I'll get you this minute. And with that being said, it's because we took a stand. And so we do have to do a better job. The left, the woke crowd, they're loud, they're angry, they're militant. And again, I have a job. I don't have time spoke of, you know, the governor issued you can't take the Capitol, you can't stay here overnight, and then the order was given, the police backed off, and they took the grounds, they stayed overnight. One of my troopers got fired. That's a whole other issue. But they were put in an impossible situation. And again, kind of like the third graders who go to high school and they can't read or write. There's a certain percentage of those kids, white, black, brown, purple, that they are destined to fail. So when you create a hostile environment,